Okay, we're going live. So, some new developments since we had our last live stream. I've actually gotten to the point where Vinay had released a workspace, which is actually a place where you can do your development. And what it requires is that you have Docker Desktop and or some sort of Docker. It's been tested with Docker Desktop on Mac. He has two versions. He has one that'll work on Intel and the other that will work on um, Apple Silicon. So I'm running today. I have an M3 Mac. That's what I'm running today, and I'll share my screen out. I'll just quickly talk through the steps to get things started. Let's do this real quick and just drag this over. Okay, so here I've got a workspace that I cloned. Okay, and let me see if I've got. Do I still have? Let me just see if I still got it. No, I may not have. No, I don't have it. I don't have it saved in my shell history, but let me see. Oh wait, maybe I do. iTerm2, let's see. I did a git clone of the repo. Here it is, right here. And I'll drop a link in the comments, but that's the repo. You clone it. So what I did is I cloned it here. I ran a git clone, and I had where am I working out of? 1122. Let me just make sure I'm in the right place. Documents, dev, threat modeling, git. Okay, so I must have cloned it here where it says workspace, because this is the workspace right here. And when you do a git clone, the only thing that you'll have in your workspace is this dev container. And what you'll do is you'll start VS Code, and I have the Docker plugin. So when it starts, it'll start the Docker container. Now you want to make sure that you have Docker Desktop started, and then you start your Docker container. Then you start VS Code in that directory, and then it automatically starts up a Docker image. And it'll take some time. See if you could see here. This has been a couple days ago, but I had been running this for quite a bit of time. Maybe I don't have the output. All right. So the idea here is that you don't have to go through the whole process of cloning the ADM repo and pulling down and then installing Go. Vinay provides a container for you to run this in, which is pretty nice because then at that point, all you're really worried about is focusing on threat modeling, right? Because that's the reason why if I wanted to fast forward and not really worry about my environment, especially if I were not, if I were concerned about like what do I have to running on my desktop, do I have the ability to run certain types of programs? This just kind of takes all that away from you. And I know he's also working on a a web version of it, which will be even easier than running this Docker container, because I had an older Intel Mac, which I just, because of Black Friday, I traded up to an M3, added more cores, more memory, and this by far is easier. It runs it. I don't have any problems running it as amongst everything else I have running, and I haven't had any problems. So you can see I've been running this Docker container for quite some time. So what I'm going to do today is I'm gonna start. So now let's assume that you have, let's say that you have your container up and running. You'll just have this .dev container. You see, what I did was I copied ADDB and test examples to this workspace folder. So the way it maps out, and I'll just go back to iTerm here, is you'll have a local directory called workspace, right? That's where you clone his repo. And see here, I have it in users, Rod Castillo, documents, dev, threat modeling, git, workspace. That's where I'm working right now, right? So if I want to copy something, so the way that he's got the Docker image set up is that he maps a local. He maps the drive so that, or he maps the connection back to your host operating system. So anything I put in this workspace directory will magically show up in the Docker container. And so it gives me access to both the Docker container file space and then my local host file space. Right. And again, that's, just for ease of being able to work, because again, you really, as an analyst, you really should just be focused on looking at threat models and not having to worry about whether the environment's up or how do I, this is just reduces the friction of working with it. So, okay. So the other thing to bear in mind is that you'll need to copy the files that you want to work with into this workspace directory, and then it'll automatically show up here, right? So you can see these were some of the files that I created with Vinay and TJ earlier this week. So yeah, what do I want to do first? I would like to start with a fresh scenario. I have two scenarios that Vinay had looked at, and I'm just going to plan to go through, start working through them, and then if I run out of time, the next live stream I do, I'll just work on the next one. But my idea here is I'll work on these. Sometimes there'll be people on here, sometimes there won't. I don't know. I guess the idea here is let's learn by sharing. So I'm going to start with the next. Let's start with the next one. So I have another scenario that I wrote up, and it's just in a Google Doc. So I'm going to bring that Google Doc up. Okay. Let's bring this one up. Vinay had reviewed it and provided some comments on it. And this one is just called exploiting unpatched software on endpoint devices. So we know that software vulnerabilities are inevitable as software gets analyzed by both ethical hackers and malicious hackers. Weaknesses are discovered, and vendors will provide patches to help mitigate the threats of unpatched software. So let's say in this scenario, you have endpoint devices that are running outdated versions of software or operating systems, and these outdated versions of software have known vulnerabilities that have not been patched. So let's let's see here. These are comments by Vinay, which I do appreciate him going through this document and giving his comments. So what we'll do is we'll start with this. So I'm going to talk through this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to build a simple threat model just based on this. That's all. And we're going to use ADM for that. And we're going to try to use the syntax just so at the end of this, we'll have an ADM file, and we'll have an image a graphic that we can use. And then we could check this in. I'd like to be able to check this into Vinay's repo of ADM files. All right, so the first, I'm just going to talk from a high level because I'd like to try to fast forward into working in ADM. So what's the first step? Really, there's vulnerability discovery and research. So we have these, and I'll make this a little bigger so you can read it. We know that attackers will monitor public databases, forums, and websites that disclose vulnerabilities and look for unpatched software vulnerabilities, and especially the ones with high severity scores or public exploit code. So they're going to look for vulnerabilities for software, and typically it's going to be software that a lot of people use and don't tend to patch, right? So the next is they'll identify a target. So various reconnaissance techniques, they'll identify organizations, individuals using vulnerable software versions. They can do this by scanning or looking for specific software footprints. So for example, if you are targeting somebody who is a Unix shop, you probably have a front end that's internet facing that has like an Nginx server or some sort of a web server on your front end. There's probably a web server, application server, database, the tiering of application. So as an attacker, you're probably going to be looking for an organization, a version of web server that someone's running, and you're going to be looking for different organizations that run that type of server. Okay. The next is using available exploit tools or custom crafted code. Attackers target specified, identify vulnerable systems. So in this situation, we're actually, let me go back. We're looking at unpatched software on endpoint devices. So really, this could really be endpoint devices, meaning somebody's laptop or phone. It also could mean servers that are hosted on AWS or some platform that or have knowledge, that some organization runs those. So here we think about what we're going to target. We find an organization running it. We say, okay, this is what they're running. So what are the tools that I can use to exploit it? Okay, so if I'm going to be targeting end users' devices, maybe I use I target them using phishing, or I'm sending emails with links, or I find ways to get them to click on a link to download some software. If it's a internet facing system, I'm going to look for a vulnerability that will allow me to gain access, right? That's really this exploitation phase. Once the exploit is successful, Attackers will gain a foothold on the target device. Depending on the nature of the vulnerability, it might obtain user level or even admin level privileges. Okay. 5 is privilege escalation. If initial access is a lower privilege level, the attacker will often use tools or exploits to elevate the privileges. With elevated privileges, they can move laterally in the network, identifying other devices or servers with the same vulnerability or exploiting other weaknesses. 7, they're exfiltrating data. So these are a lot of steps. Now that I think about it, in this short period of time, maybe we try to tackle one or two of these. So one thing that Vinay had come up with, which is, let's see if I can bring it over here. He called it the ADM Builder's Guide, right? Okay, so we have our scenario, but really I want to follow his Builder's Guide, right? So if I marry up, this is what I kind of my layman's terms of understanding of how someone could attack an organization by exploiting unpatched software. And then I take it and put it inside of a document. Let's take this context from the way that Vinay says, hey, you should be following. Let's go ahead and follow his guide. It says, this is a step-by-step process that he suggests we follow to build our ADM files. Okay, our attack-defense model, or ADM files. Okay, so analysis starts with identifying the entities participating in the model. Any software system involves collaboration. Okay, so let's say we're thinking about an unpatched server on the internet, right? An internet facing unpatched something, right? Server, I guess an EC2 instance would probably be good. Maybe it's a Bastion host that's on the internet that isn't patched. So let's go back to our ADM Builder's Guide. So step 1 early is list the entities and the communication lines between them, right? Okay. So that's really the first step. So he says, okay, step 1 is that's the entities and communication points. So let's just say in our example here, we're talking about a EC2 instance that is internet facing, right? Okay. And this EC2 instance is an unpatched Bastion host. So we know that it's running port 22 to allow admins to SSH into the environment, right? So, okay, so we did that. Think about the following topics when you're building your attacks and defenses. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so we can see it. Okay. All right. these are the things to think about. Now, in a previous conversation with him, he had said, we should go to MITRE. So let's go to MITRE attack. Let's search, right? Unpatched. Let's see if there's something. Like this one, exploitation of remote services technique. Okay. Yeah, look at this. Okay, so this is a general attack technique, right? That exploitation of remote services. Adversaries may exploit a remote service to gain unauthorized access once inside of a network. Exploitation of a software vulnerability occurs when an adversary takes advantage of a program error in a program service or with an operating system, software or kernel with itself to execute adversary-controlled code. The common goal of post-compromise exploitation of remote services is for lateral movement and to enable access to the remote system. An adversary may determine if remote system is in a vulnerable state, which may be done through network service discovery. So that would be a precondition, right? If we're thinking about like our steps, this is good. So first you have to, instead of like starting with the vulnerability, maybe the idea is you generally know how to exploit Unix-based vulnerabilities. So you target an organization that runs AWS, for which you know they are running, they're potentially running unpatched Unix operating systems in whatever form, right? So let's go back to this. So instead of that, we'll assume that they have a general knowledge, right? So let's start to put together our attack defense model, right? So I'm going to go back here to my container. I'm going to create a new file, right? And I've created this little cheat sheet that captures my kind of my workflow when I create ADM files. And I'm just going to, what I typically do is I use, as I get to the point where I'm creating a attack defense model, I start by just using this cheat sheet, right? So I'm going to create attack defense model for, let's just take a look at our exploiting unpatched software. Touch. Exploiting unpatched endpoint. ADM. Okay, so there's the file I created, right there. See, it's blank. So what I'm going to do, because I'm still pretty new to this, is I'm going to take a look at an example, and then let's just get started, right? So we have a model, right? And I'm going to start by putting that here at the top, and let's just go exploiting unpatched endpoint. Okay, so the next one. All right. Okay. Crazy. All right, let's go and keep this going. All right, so what's the next thing? I want to describe what I'm going to do as an attacker and what I'm going to do as a defender. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. Okay. So as a defender or as an attacker, I want to identify vulnerable endpoints in a victim's vulnerable internet-facing endpoint in a victim's environment, right? So I can use a vulnerability to gain access to that endpoint, right? As a defender, I want to patch my endpoint so that an attacker cannot exploit them using a known vulnerability, right? Okay, so that's just high level, right? Okay, so what's the next thing? So let's think about this. All right. So now let's think about what's the first attack. The first attack is there's got to be some way the attacker, as an attacker, you want to attack a certain an organization's environment. You know maybe you know their IP space. So if you know somehow you've gotten their IP space, next is to identify vulnerable systems. So if we go back to our notes, really what did I do with that? I thought I put some notes in here. Maybe I didn't. It's back here from the miter. Right here. See? So here we need to attacker needs identify remote systems that are in a vulnerable state, right? That's probably the first attack. So let's make sure we have the right format. Okay, maybe we just keep it simple. I won't use these tags yet. So it's attack, identify vulnerable systems, right? Attack, and is it attack colon? Let's see. Yeah, attack colon. Identify victims, remote systems that are in a vulnerable state. Okay, so that's one. Okay. All right. So all right, let me think. Let's go back to Minder. Okay, so let's look at, okay, given that an attacker knows the range of IPs in a victim's. So the first assumption is, given that an attacker knows the IP address range for a victim's internet-facing systems, right? So when then, okay, so when they, and let's go back to the MITRE framework. What does the MITRE framework say? When they let's copy that, because I want to make sure I copy the link here for the MITRE framework. And let's give this one, let's call it discovery. We'll call it that tag. I know I said I wasn't going to do tags, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. When an attacker uses a network discovery tool, then the attacker finds one or more servers deployed on the network that has vulnerabilities or similar software that has vulnerabilities that will allow for remote exploitation. Yeah, it sounds pretty good, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's put the. Okay, so I'm an attacker. I've found the IP range. I have their IP range, and then maybe let's take a look at how they. Okay, maybe we call this one discover vulnerable devices. Vulnerable systems. Let's call it vulnerable servers. Okay. All right. So that's pretty good. So let's do this. In my workflow, I typically will do a stat. So like let's do ADM. Is it ADM-A? Let's look at my cheat sheet. So ADM stat-A and then the name of the file. Stat-A. Exploiting. Okay, so that's the model and that's the attack. Okay. I guess could be one defense against that, right? Maybe one defense could be put your internet-facing assets behind some kind of firewall that will detect network discovery tools, so that you're not able to exploit it, right? You're not able to find. Okay, so let's see how defenses are. Okay, actually, let's go back to this. Service discovery. All right, where defense is at for network discovery mitigation? Look at this. Okay, so this is defense right here. Network traffic flow. So let's see. Is it network traffic flow? So really monitor the network for uncommon traffic flows. Processes utilizing the network do not normally have a network communication network. Never seem suspicious. Okay. Oh, but this is going to be already. But you would be able to know that your machine's getting port scanned. But This would be a lateral move. So I'm gonna. So let's see if there's a defense for negation. Application isolation, sandboxing, disable, remove, minimize available service to only those necessary. That could be exploit protection, network segment networks and system produce imperial systems. Well, I mean, this is probably the most likely defense. Updates is by employing patch management. Okay. So let's start with this one. Update software is as the defense, right? Okay, so how do we tie a defense back to? Okay, so we would tie it back to that by putting the tag above it, right? Okay, so let's put. I think I can think of two defenses. One would be just the patching, right? Because even if right, if you did patch it, then hey Vinay, I'm sorry, I put the wrong link in.
Yeah, no problem.
How you doing?
Doing good. How about you guys?
Yeah, pretty good. It's just me today. I I could have just screwed up and not. Okay. I don't know if TJ is available, and I know I'm
Mhm.
almost out of time. But I started going down this road of building, just to kind of walk you through this. Um, when I started the live stream, I just walked through how I'm using
Mhm.
the, the workspace now and how I deploy the workspace. And then I just started building out this ADM, attack defense model, uh, exploiting an unpatched endpoint, which
Mhm.
so that's what I used the I want to get in the I want to get to the point where I'm following a normal like path to doing it. So I've been using the ADM Builder's Guide. I have my own cheat sheet, and then I'm using MITRE tag.
Mhm. Mhm.
So um, and I wanted all right. So this is what I have so far. So if I'm an attacker and I'm targeting an organization, I'm going to have general knowledge of an organization's, like, if they're Unix environment, if I know
Mhm.
they're Unix
Yeah.
shop, then I'm going to know about Unix vulnerabilities. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to look for their IP space, and I got to find a vulnerable server, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's the first step, right? So discovery, and then what I did is I found the MITRE attack. uh, MITRE attack. There's an attack for um, exploitation of remote services, and then the really first step is just this network discovery. So I'm just really quickly gonna put two of these two defenses. Like the first one for me was just the real simple one, right? Patch your regularly scan and patch uh, internet facing servers, right? That given that now again, I'm just following this
Mhm.
defense when then revoke the token. Um, okay, so when a server, so for what I'm going to write is when a server is deployed and it is and the server is interfacing. Uh,
Maybe you can say then the server should have all the patches present before deployment, something like that.
yes, yes, yes. And so it'd be when a server is planned for deployment and will be internet facing. I'll do this as the and here, and server will be internet facing. Then server should have all of the most up-to-date security patches applied before deployment.
Mhm.
Okay. I want to do one more defense. So let's see. Discover vulnerable servers. Okay, so this one is I found. First, let me do this. Okay, I don't want to do that one because that would be over the next step. This was update software. Network segmentation. Right.
But if you're saying it's internet facing, would you say you segment public facing stuff into a separate network? Is that what you're planning?
Yeah, that's my thought. And maybe
Okay.
even like instead of just having a Bastion host purely on the
Mhm.
internet, maybe you have to go through a firewall, and then
Mhm.
and at that point there could be some detection in place so that I can I would know, like, I would know that somebody was trying to port scan my
Mhm.
device or my
Yeah.
server, and then yeah, I would have something in place like maybe a firewall or IPS to
Mhm.
say, yeah, and then if I determine that there is a someone port scans me from an IP address, then I can always block that port.
Yep, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, or I'm just thinking like if you if you detect that there's some abnormal behavior or there's behavior from a part of the world that I know I don't do business with, I just block it, right?
Yeah. Instead of saying firewall, you can probably mention Cloudflare. That way, it's easier for people to
Ah,
go to a documentation, because
yes,
firewall is a pretty generic term.
yes,
Unless you are an IT or a SRE who knows about firewalls,
yes.
people are kind of flying blind when you just mention a generic firewall.
Okay, okay. So, um, with that in mind, so
I think you missed a defense line, like the title of the defense.
yeah, yeah. So this would be defense. Use Cloudflare
Yeah, or
to
put the server behind Cloudflare, something like that.
put put the server behind Cloudflare.
Yeah.
Okay, so when uh, when the attacker attempts to connect to, so wait, there should be a given statement, right? Given that the server is behind Cloudflare,
No. Uh,
or you don't have to.
Given it cannot be behind Cloudflare in the given, right? Because this defense is asking you to put it behind Cloudflare.
Okay,
So you can probably add, given that server is internet facing, but that's again optional. Depends on your situation.
yeah, I'll finish that. Given the server is internet facing.
Hmm.
Okay, just from the syntax perspective, a defense would have something that outlines like the assumptions behind like when something
Yeah.
and then do this, right?
Yeah. So you can look at it as, when is your action, then is the result you're looking for.
Okay. Oh, okay. So if I go back to this, when the attacker attempts to connect to the server,
Hmm.
then Cloudflare blocks the connection, right?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe there it would be could be there be like an and statement and the attacker's IP address
Hmm.
is of a outside the whitelist, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. Then Cloudflare blocks the connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're working on models, there are two approaches you can take. Here you took the quick one to finish the model, where
Yes.
in the when and the and statement you basically covered all the situations.
Hmm.
Sometimes it makes sense to break it off as a separate model, because Cloudflare configuration itself can be a model in itself.
Oh.
What you do is you start with this, and once you're done with this base model, start working on the Cloudflare model, and once that's done, find points of connection between this and that model.
Oh, how do you? How would you? So in our situation here, would we
Mhm.
stop with? Would we stop here, and then the Cloudflare model would be another file, then, right?
No, I would still continue what you're doing because
Yes.
you're currently focused on finishing this model. So I
Yes.
would
Yes.
still go with that. Once you're done with this model, you're happy with you covering all the bases of the server, then you start working on the Cloudflare.
Okay.
So this is like you're spidering out into different parts of the system. You started focusing on one server only to find out that there are other parts in the system that may collaborate, that may contribute to security. So you introduce Cloudflare into the picture. So once you have introduced Cloudflare, Cloudflare configuration, which features of Cloudflare would you use, all of them become a separate model. So you work purely on the Cloudflare model. You don't bother about this model at that time. And once both
Yes.
the models are ready, you start a review cycle where you find how can I connect this defense to one of the pieces in Cloudflare. It can be more than one sometimes.
Okay.
So over time, what that gives you is a larger model of your deployment because now you have two entities, which basically means you're introducing a threat model concept here.
Mm, okay.
So you're building up or you're going from ground up. You're building models for every entity separately and then connecting them up into a larger architecture.
Do you do you find that this should be done by a team of analysts working together, kind of over time? And
It can be, yes. Like how developers collaborate on building products, analysts should collaborate on building specific models because SREs are probably better equipped to give you a good Cloudflare model.
oh,
Or if the infra or IT guys are responsible for Cloudflare, they know in and out of how they have configured their Cloudflare instance. It's easier for them to go build that model and probably quicker.
yes.
Will you focus on this model and then you guys sit down and find out how are these two interacting in reality.
So if an organization wanted to adopt ADM, it
Hmm.
it starts with an analyst kind of introducing this, and then slowly building out all the entities, but
Hmm.
along the way potentially bringing in people that they could partner with that have more subject matter expertise, like an
Yeah.
SRE or um,
You'll have SREs, you will have product folks, you will have monitoring folks because once you give these two models,
yeah.
monitoring folks may find a gap in logging where they can see Cloudflare logs, but they can't see what happened on the server after Cloudflare let that connection in.
Oh, okay.
So then the operations guys would review the both the models and say, I think there is another defense or incident response missing.
Okay.
So if you see, this is you're slowly getting into what you call as agile DevOps, sorry, agile security or some kind of agile security practices where
Okay.
you go in cycles, in short cycles, try to finish your model, start adding on top of it, and over time your model organically grows.
Okay. Because I definitely think if you try to get it done very quickly, it
Mhm.
it feels like you feel like you could start to boil the ocean because there's so many places that they could spider off to,
True.
that I'm trying to think of a sustainable way of doing this in light of the
Mhm.
fact that, in a lot of organizations we all wear multiple hats, right? I could do this. I could just purely focus on this, and this could be my full-time job, but it can't, because that's not, um, just to do this in places where I work is just not the when we just don't have enough people to be able to do that. But I do think having this knowledge and doing this over time, over a course of a reasonable time period, uh, if I devoted myself to an organization for a certain period of time, I would be able to work through all the models and
Mhm.
then engage all the right people and then raise the maturity of all the, I guess, the all of the defenses, right.
Yeah.
That's sort of I kind of think this is the magic behind this, is because it's a very simple, I don't want to oversimplify, but I think engaging people to do this doesn't require any money. It just requires you to think about it, and it takes
Yeah.
time and the important stuff in life, right? Like
Mhm.
you're trying to defend your environment. This is what I really like about this is it's very straightforward, and there's a lot of artistic license behind it. But yet, if you follow the builder guide and then you use things like MITRE ATT&CK, you're
Mhm.
taking some very keep it simple approach, but
Yep.
you're coming up with these defenses and organizing them in such a way where, like here, just to end our session, like here, I'll just go ahead and graphic, right?
Yeah.
ADM graph. Let's let's graph what we have, and then let's exploiting. I just want to call it exploiting. The output file should be a PNG.
Yeah.
PNG, and then graph viz dot dot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Look at that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes, it's not a one person job.
Yes.
You need a team, probably an entire army of security analysts to cover the entire company's attacks and defenses.
Yes.
But yeah, this is the starting point.
Is the thinking behind having the attack defense database to provide people with a starting point? Like,
So ADDB is when you have multiple models
yes.
and you start seeing that there are models dedicated for specific entities. Taking this example, we identified Cloudflare as a separate entity.
Yes.
You may create one model or five models for Cloudflare. It's really your personal choice. But once you have created that, Cloudflare will be one entity in ADDB, and your server may be a second entity. Now you go to ADSM, build a threat model that connects these two to create a larger ADM.
Okay.
And that's why I wanted everybody to get comfortable with ADM first before we talk about ADSM. Otherwise, you'll just get confused.
My goal is to take this back to places where I work
Mm-hmm.
and uh, get people engaged to
Uh-huh.
start to uh, build this out. You know, like my day job, I work in an AWS environment,
Mm-hmm.
AWS shop. So I kind of want to be partner with people in the organization to build this out. So um, I know I'm coming up on the end of my time because with my wife's situation, I said only be an
Mm-hmm.
hour. But I'm going to continue to flesh this out because I there's two things that I'm doing over the next week. One is I'll finish this. So I still have to get to the point where um, there it does. The attacker does exploit. Maybe we don't have these, and then I do want to cover like the defenses if they're to detect lateral movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but this was a good one though because a lot of this demands that people really know their environment, right? Like
Yeah.
where you just can't have open connections, right? Like, yeah.
So the good thing with this tool is when you start writing the specification, you immediately identify that you don't know something.
Hmm.
And it kind of pushes you to go explore and figure out what is there currently before you write a model. So whether people like it or not, this tool kind of forces everybody to think deeply about their environment and try to know their environment before they want to secure it.
Yes. Yes. Um, Vinay, thank you. I'm sorry. I better drop. Uh,
No problem.
but and sorry about I for some reason I had the wrong link in the meeting invite. So, uh, next Friday,
Mhm.
I schedule another time. I'll make sure today I'll update the meeting link and we should be good. But between now and then, my goal is to work through the rest of the attacks and defenses in this
Mhm.
model and then walk through that. And then I'll talk to TJ, see if he's got a model that he could talk through as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. I better drop off, but I hope you have a great weekend.
You too have a great weekend. Take
Okay.
care.